Hi, in this video I'll demonstrate how to use the animated glitch action for Photoshop. With this tool you can create beautiful animated shots in few clicks. Let's see a couple of examples. I used the action on this image and I had the result in a couple of minutes like this. And the next one is a quick variation of the first animation. Okay, now second image, and this is the animated result. A still variation, another still image of the second image. Okay, then I use the action on logos with and without alpha, and I had results like this. And here is the logo with alpha with a video in the background. So let's get into Photoshop and see how to install the action file. To do it, go to menu window here on the top, select actions, and when the actions panel opens, click on the icon at the top right here, select load actions, find the action file on your hard drive, select it and load it. As you can see, now the action is correctly installed. Now let's open the image that we are going to work with. For this example, I'm going to use this one. As you can see, this is a high resolution image and the resolution is 3000 pixels. The add-on was tested on images between 250 pixels and 4000 pixels. Obviously, with an image of 4000 pixels, the workflow is a bit heavier and slower. So for this example, I'm going to reduce the resolution of this image to 600 pixels like this. Then hit OK. There are a few things to check before playing the action. The first one is that you must have only one layer on your PSD file, and it has to be marked as background like this. If your image is not marked as background and you have a situation like this, you can turn it to a background layer just by selecting it, going to layer here on the top, new, background from layer. Okay, now it's correct. Second thing, go to image mode and make sure that your image is in RGB color mode and it's 8 bits per channel. Then go to the layers panel here, click on the icon at the top right of the panel, select panel option, and make sure that the option add copy to copy layers and group is active like this. Select OK. And now, last thing before playing the action, you can also open the timeline of Photoshop. To do it, go to menu window and select timeline. This is the timeline. I will adjust a bit the interface here. Okay, now we are ready for the playback of the action. So select the action. If you want, you can also click on the arrow at the left of the name of the action to open it before the playback. And when you will hit play, you will see the action generating automatically many glitch effects that you will be able to work with after the playback. You will see this both in the layers panel and in the timeline of Photoshop. Okay, now make sure that the action is selected and click play. The playback will take around 2 minutes and I will skip this phase, and so see you in a few. Okay, when the playback finishes, this message will appear. You can click both continue or stop. Now let's close the actions panel because we don't need it for now. And let me close also the adjustment panel and the color panel to see better the layers panel. Okay, as you can see in the layers panel, there are a mess of layers. To quickly organize it, go to the top layer, the top group, which is glitch output. Hold Alt on your keyboard and then click the arrow here near the name. Then release Alt from your keyboard and click again the arrow. As you can see, the layers are now better organized. Now let's take a look at the animation. To do it, press play in the timeline here. As you can see, the action automatically generated this video with glitch effects which are blended together and spreaded in the timeline. If you're working with images of high resolution, probably the first two playbacks will be slow because Photoshop needs to cache the information, but then from the third or the fourth playback it will be smoother. Also take note that when you click play, Photoshop doesn't show the full quality of the image, but it shows a lower quality. This to make the real-time playback of the animation possible. If you want to look at a frame at full resolution, you have to click stop. Okay, if you go to check a frame, it will be high resolution. And if you drag the cursor, it will be a lower resolution. Okay, now let's focus a bit on the timeline. There are a few things to know. As you can see, the action generated an animation of 100 frames. You can read it here. And it's 25 frames per second. So it's an animation of 4 seconds. And if you check, all the glitch effects are packed in the first 75 frames, from here to 0. And then there is 25 frames of rest, where only the grain is animated. And then the animation look back again. We will see in a few how to modify the length of your animation. You can make it longer or shorter as you wish. And also we will see how to modify the glitch effects. Let's see a couple of useful options that you can find in the timeline. For example, if you click this icon at the top right of the panel, you can activate loop playback. If this option is not active and you play back once your animation, it will stop at the end like this. So I keep it active like this. Another useful thing is going here in panel option and activating the small thumbnail size option. This make the whole file more controllable. Also, I like to use the frame number as instead of the timecode because it's easier for me to read the frames here. Okay, now click OK here. Now we are ready to work on the layers and animation, but before there is a step that I like to do, and it's making a snapshot on the history panel. To do it, go to Window, open the history panel, okay. Then click the arrow at the top right here of the panel and select New Snapshot. Then select OK. This has created this snapshot, and if you make any variation to the file that you don't like, you can double click the snapshot and get back to the history state that you have now. So for example, if I delete some frames, I don't know, some layers, I can go back to the beginning just by double clicking the snapshot. Let's close the history panel. Now let's take a look at the structure of layers here in the layers panel. As you can see, inside the main group glitch output, there are 6 other subgroups and a base layer. The purple group and the yellow one are used for color correction and post effects, while the red one, the orange, green and blue are all glitch effects. Okay, we can turn off the color option for now and we will take a look at it later. Okay, so starting from the bottom, there is the previously mentioned base layer, and it's a copy of the starting layer background, and it's the main image of the animation, and all the effects will run above it. Okay, so if you open the glitch output group also in the timeline, you can see that this is a copy of what you have in the layers panel. Each layer here corresponds to a layer in the layer panel. Okay, now let's open the glitches group here in the layers panel and expand the panel a bit like this. As you can see, inside this group there are 5 glitch effects that correspond to 5 clips of animation that we will see in the timeline in a few. And also, if you notice, the first layer of the group is a help layer. This is just a reminder of all the customization that you can do to this layer. So for example, with the glitches group, you can duplicate layers, move them in the timeline, change opacity, change blending mode, scale them, move them, or also animate their values. We will see it in a few. Each subgroup inside of the glitch output has a help layer to remind you what you can do with each type of effect. Okay, now let's open the glitches group here in the timeline. Now you can see the 5 clips that there are inside of this group, and if you select one of the clip, you automatically select also the corresponding layer in the layers panel. And let's hide for a moment all the other effects and leave only the glitch group. Okay, if you drag your cursor over each group, you can see what it does. Like this. The customization of this first animation is really easy to do. For example, you can just move the clips in the timeline and change the sequence of effects, or you can pick one of the clip and duplicate it. To do it, press ctrl J on the keyboard after selecting it, or you can also drag and drop it here in the new layer button here. As you can see, now it's duplicated, and I can move it in the timeline to make this effect double. Let's do it also for some of the other layers. Ctrl J and move it, Ctrl J again, and now we have a variation of the first animation. You can also apply transforms to the clips. For example, if I want to make the distort left a little bit different, I can edit the layer, but remember that if you want to edit this layer, the timeline cursor has to be above the clip. Okay, otherwise the clip is freezed, the layer is freeze, and you can't apply transforms. So let's move our timeline here, select the clip, then press Ctrl T on your keyboard, and now you can see that you can modify the size and the position of the clip. Okay, let me delete these newly generated layers to make it more clean. Another thing to take note of is that the blending mode of all of these layers are normal and the opacity is 100%. So when you have two clips that are overlapping like this, only the top layer is visible. In this case is distort left. As you can see, only the top one is visible. You can modify the opacity of the top layer to make them both visible, or also change the blending mode, for example to lighten, to make them both visible. Or you can try also something like screen that make it more brighter, and you have a flash-like effect. I suggest to try all the blending modes when you are doing this, because the result really depends on the image you are working on. Another thing that is possible to do is to animate some values of each one of these layers. To do it, click the icon, arrow icon near the name of one of the layers. So for example, I use distort left. And now you can see the three parameters that can be animated: transform, opacity, and style. So if I want to apply an animation in the transform, I move my timeline at the beginning of the clip, select this icon, and it will activate the keyframe animation on my clip. Okay, now I move the cursor of the timeline and apply a transform, pressing Ctrl T on the keyboard, I will just move my layer somewhere else, maybe outside of the canvas. Then I press enter on the keyboard to apply the transform. Okay, now maybe I will move this keyframe outside of the clip. Okay, now you can see that our layer is animated. Okay, I can also animate the opacity. So for example, if I want this layer to be 100% opacity at the beginning, I do it like this. Keyframe also to the opacity, move the timeline, and then I set opacity to 0. Okay, I move this keyframe outside from the clip. Okay, as you can see now also the opacity is animated. Also take note that if you don't want to use one of the effects, you can simply hide the layer in the layers panel. Okay, now we can go on and take a look at the blurs. So let me close and hide the glitches group also here. Okay, and open the blurs layer both in the timeline and the layers panel. Now click play on the timeline to see also this animation, and here it is. We have two vertical blurs and two horizontal blurs. The usage of this group of effects is very similar to the glitches. It's the same thing. Take note that also the blurs are in normal mode, so if it overlaps with any of the glitches, only the blur will be visible. You can avoid it by changing the blending mode of the blur layers, for example to lighten. Okay, so let's make an overlap here. Okay, this is overlapping with the distort vertical glitch. Let's see it too. And if I hide this, as you can see, only the top layer is visible. So I use lighten as blending mode, and now I can see both the effect. You can also change the blending mode and opacity of the main group, and this will affect all the layers inside of it. So if you want all the blurs to be in lighten mode, you just have to set lighten in the blending mode of this group. Always keep as reference the help layer of each group to remember what can be customized. So for example, also here you can duplicate, move in timeline, change opacity, change blending mode, scale, move, and animate values like the glitches. Okay, so now let's move on. Let me close some of the groups here. Okay, and talk about the color options. Unhide the group and open it. As you can see here, you have 12 different color options, and the default one is black and white option number 1. Unhide them one at a time and choose your favorite. When you choose the color option that you want to use, remember that if you open the group, you can also modify the layers that makes it, and also you can modify the opacity of the group to make it more or less visible. The last color option is a negative effect, and it can be very useful because you can animate the opacity of these groups, and you can use this to make something like flashes. So for example, I open the color option group here in the timeline, go to the last group, open it, negative. As you can see, the opacity value here can be animated, so let's make an example. Let's say that the negative color option is opacity 0% at the beginning. I move in the timeline and set a keyframe. From here to here, the opacity of the negative effect will be 0%. So I move to the next keyframe using this button here near the play, and in this keyframe the opacity will be 100%. As you can see, the timeline puts the keyframe automatically because the automatic keyframe is active here. Okay, So I go forward of about 2 frames like this and set another keyframe here. So the color option will be 100% from frame 17 to frame 19, and then at frame 20 it will be 0% again. Let's see the animation, and we have our flash now, negative flash. You can duplicate this animation very easily. To do it, select all of the keyframe with the mouse, then right click one of them, select copy, then move in the timeline, right click again one of them, select paste. As you can see, the keyframes are pasted where the timeline is positioned. So I can do it again, move and paste, move and paste again. So let's see our animation now. As you can see, now we have some negative flash effects. Okay, so now let's close the color option group here and here, and let's take a look at the chromatic aberration. But first let's hide all of these groups, color option, blurs and glitches, to see this group better. So unhide the group and open it. Open it also in the timeline. As you can see here, you have 3 different effects. The third one is hidden, but you can unhide it, do like this. Okay, these are chromatic aberrations. You can see them here in the photo. Okay, here the blending mode is set to lighten, and just leave it like this, and the opacity is 50%. You can change the opacity easily. Okay, and let's take a look also to the other options. In the first option you have an RGB color. The second one you have red and channel. In the third one is yellow and purple. Okay, the main difference between this group and the previous one is that these layers are smart object, and the animation that is inside of this layer can be modified. So let's take a look at option number 1. Double click the smart object to open it. Okay, as you can see, inside there are 3 layers. They are called RGB, and if you click play, you can see the animation here. Okay, and if you open each one of these layers, you can see the keyframes here. And all this animation can be modified by adding or changing these frames. As you can see, all of these keyframes are set to hold mode. This is why they are squared. If you want to have a smooth transition between the keyframes, you can select all of the keyframes, right click on one of them and change to linear interpolation here, and this will have a smoother interpolation between the movements. Okay, so let's leave hold for now and close this layer. As you can see here in the help layer, also in this group you can do a lot of customizations. So for example, if you want to use only the option number 1 for the whole video, you can hide the other 2 and duplicate it a couple of times and just move it in the timeline like this. Here the animation finishes, and now you will have the option number 1 of the chromatic aberrations for the whole length of the animation. Okay, so let's delete these 3 layers. Both the chromatic aberrations and chromatic glitches are effects about colors. This is why they are positioned above the color option and effects. So for example, if you have a black and white color option, let's see like this, you will still have the color of the chromatic aberration and glitches. Let's hide for a moment the negative option. Okay, here is it. Okay, now let's take a look at the chromatic glitches. So close these two groups, close it also here, and unhide the chromatic glitches group and open it. Open it also in the timeline, like this. And inside this group we have three other effects. As you can see, the first and the last one has a length of 75 frames. They are longer clips than the previous one. And the blank screen, the number 2, is a small clip, and it's another flash, this one. So let's take a look only to the blank line, hide the first two. As you can see, it's set to color dodge. Here you can modify the blending mode to screen or lighten. Try also the other blending modes. So let's take a look at this effect, and it's just this simple line that creates something like an interference. And also here you can modify the animation inside of this marked object. So for example, double click it. You can see here the blank line layer, and if you open the layer here in the timeline, you can see the animation. Okay, and this can be modified too. So let's close this layer. As I said before, the blank screen is a simple flash. You can duplicate it and move it in the timeline, and it is this one. And also here you can change the blending mode from color dodge to screen or something else. Let's try to duplicate it a couple of times, and let's see the result. Okay, let me delete these two layers now, and let's take a look to RGB glitches. Let's see them animated. The glitches are these lines, RGB lines that appears like an interference. Also here you can modify the animation inside of the smart object. So let's open it. As you can see here, you have 10 layers to work with, and each of these layers has its own animation. So for example, if I want to change the animation of line copy number 9, I open it in the timeline and I can change the animation. If you want to make all of these lines visible at once, you can position the timeline at frame 0, select them all, and set the opacity to 100%. And so these are the lines. As you can see, they are positioned randomly in the canvas, and if you're using an image of lower resolution, these lines can go outside of the canvas. So you can easily reposition them doing like this. Select the Move tool here in the Tools panel, then activate the option Show Transform Controls. So now if you select a layer, you will see its bounding box like this, and you can use the arrow keys in the keyboard or also drag it to move it around. Okay, so let's move these lines in a better position. This one here, this one is okay here. Okay, last one, this one. Okay, now turn off this option, and before saving, remember to set the timeline to 0 again, to select again all the layers and set the opacity to 0. Now the original animation is restored. So let's take a look at it. Click play, and this is our RGB animation. Okay, so now let's close the smart object and save it. And now we can see the result here on the main animation. Okay, as you can see, This layer is set to color dodge 80%. You can change opacity and blending mode as you wish. Also normal works very good. Let's take a look at it. Let's try screen. It's lighter. Okay. Also, these three layers can be customized in different ways as written here in the help layer. So for example, I could select the RGB glitch layer and just rotate it up 90 degrees to make these lines vertical like this. And also, if you want to use a custom color for these three effects, it is possible. To do it, for example, if you want to change the color of the blank line, select the layer and add a new adjustment layer. In this case, use a filter. Okay, then choose the color of the filter, let's say green. Set the density to 100%. Okay, then right click on the filter and click here on create clipping mask. Now this adjustment layer will work only for the layer below it. Now let's take a look. As you can see, now our line is green. Let's change color also to the other two effects. In the blank screen, a filter also here. Okay, let's create a clipping mask also here. Use a different color like this one. Density to 100%. And let's do it also for the glitches. But in this case, don't use a filter adjustment layer, but use a solid color like this. Choose the color. I choose a random color like this. Okay. Set the clipping mask also here. And let's take a look at the result. Okay. Nice. We are done with the chromatic glitches. I will delete these three adjustment layers for now and close the group. Okay, then we have the post effects and global controls group. Let's open it in the layers panel. Let me close this green group. Okay, and let's open it also here in the timeline. Okay, as you can see, the first layer is a help layer. Then you have three global controls layers, and you can use these for the final tweaks on the image. The first one is global contrast, and you can modify the opacity of this layer to add more contrast like this. The second one is a hue saturation layer. Double click it to edit its parameters. And the last one is a level adjustment layer. Okay, below these layers we have the grain group, which is this noise that is animated. And if you open it, you can see that there are 8 layers inside of this group. Open the group also in the timeline, and you will see that these layers are distributed in the timeline to cover the length of the whole animation. And so, for example, make sure when you're working on a longer animation to duplicate the grain layer and cover the whole length like this. Okay, so let me go back to the previous state. Okay, the grain layer is set to screen mode, but you can also try other modes like lighten or color dodge. And the opacity is 25%, so you can make it more or less visible using this parameter. And then we have the vignette layer, which is this one. And also here you can modify the opacity of this layer to make it more or less visible. Let's use something like 25% in this case. And below this one there are the scan lines, which is this one. And also here you can modify the blending mode or the opacity to make it more or less visible. Now we have finished the description of layers and effects, and in the next section we will talk about how to export our file as a still image or an animated GIF or a video file, and also we will see in detail how to work on still images, how to deal with images and logos with alpha channel, and a few other things. One last thing to mention is the usage of these masks. As you can see, each subgroup of effects has his own mask, and you can use these masks to hide parts of the effect in certain areas of the image. So for example, let's take a look at frame 34 in this case. If I want to hide the chromatic aberrations in the area of the face, I just need to select the mask channel, select the brush tool, and pick a soft brush, so make sure that hardness is set to 0, decide the size of the brush, pick a black color, okay, and brush over the area that you want to hide, like this. You can do the same for all the effects. Okay, now let's see how to save our file. If you want to export a still image, you just need to decide which frame you want to export. So let's say we want to export frame number 34. We are on frame number 34. Go to File, Save As, and here decide the format that you want to save, and save it. If you want to make an animated GIF, go to File, and select Save for Web. This panel will take a few seconds to open because it has to cache the whole animation before. And here make sure to have GIF selected as type here at the top, and that the palette is set to perceptual and 256 colors, and that the jitter is set to diffusion and it's 100%. You can also lower this value and the file will be lighter, but it will also have less quality. Then make sure that the transparency option is checked like this. Take a look at the lossy parameter here. Now it's set to 10, but the best quality is at 0. But doing like this, the image will be also heavier. So try to find the best setting for your own image. Here at the bottom you can modify the resolution of your output. In fact, 600 is quite a lot for an animated GIF. So if you want to export it in a lower resolution, let's say 300, write 300 here. And also make sure that the quality here is set to be cubic sharper. This filter is very useful when you are scaling down images. Okay. Last thing is to make sure that in looping option it's set to forever. Otherwise the GIF will loop only once. Then you can click Save and save your file where you want. Let's see now how to export a video file. To do it, go to File, Export, then Render Video. Here you can decide the name of the file, select the folder where to save it. You can also decide the format, the preset, and many other options. The format H264 in high quality is a good format and has a low file size, but it's not the best quality. If you want the video exported in the best quality, just try the QuickTime option with animation high quality. Also take note that here in this panel you can also export an image sequence. So for example, if we have an animation of 100 frames, it will generate 100 images. Okay, so when you have decided your format and preset, you can click Render here. In this second example, we will quickly see how to work on still images, and I've already applied the action to this image. and this is the animation. I also choose the color option number 5 in this case. So if you want to make a still image, you just need to decide which frame you want to export. So let's say it's frame number 10. And then what you need to do is to decide which effect you want to apply on frame number 10. So for example, I want to work with the glitch distort vertical. So I will put the clips away from frame number 10. I keep only this one here. Okay. So now you can see that on frame number 10 we have the glitch distort vertical. But as you can see, the effect is applied to the whole image. One thing that you can do here is to make an inverted mask to the layer. To do it, just hold Alt on your keyboard and click this icon at the bottom of the layers panel. As you can see, now we have an inverted mask. It's black, while this one is a normal mask. And now you can pick a white brush with low hardness, and brush over the areas where you want the effect to appear, like this. I'm painting in vertical in this case because the distortion is vertical. Okay, so now you can also apply other clips. So for example, let's also apply distort left. I will make a mask also here and paint where I want to appear. And you can use this workflow with all the effects. Finally, you just need to export to save the frame number 10 as a still image. To do it, go to File, Save As, select the format, and click Save. In this last example, I will show how to work on images with alpha channel. As you can see here, we have a logo with alpha channel and a black background that I'm going to delete. And if you want to apply the action to this layer and you transform it in background layer, as you can see, the alpha channel disappears. To avoid this, you just need to rename the layer instead of transforming it in background layer. Okay, you will keep it as a normal layer and rename it as background, like this. And now you can play the action also on this layer with alpha channel. The result here, it was this. As you can see, Photoshop takes a little bit of time to cache the animation. Okay, and when you have a result like this, you can put anything in the background. So for example, here I used a video, a time-lapse video, and here it is. Okay, and last thing that I would like to show is the banner that I made for the presentation of the project. I have this banner here with the animation applied. It was also a little bit customized, and also I have a logo here with alpha channel. And the animation was customized also here in a different manner. And one thing that you can do is deselect here, auto select, select group, select the glitch output group of the logo, and drag it to the previous image. Now we have an image with two glitch outputs, and we can edit them in the same file and do different animation for them. And this is the result. Just take note that here on the image, the post effects and global controls are turned off. This is because they are already turned on here in the logo. And that's all for now. Thank you for your attention.